Welcome to Gold Derby. I'm Denton Davidson here with PGA Awards nominee Bruce Miller, creator, executive producer, and showrunner of The Handmaid's Tale. And Bruce, what has been the process of taking Margaret Atwood's incredible book and not only bringing it to life, but then you've now extended it out for 4 seasons, and it just continues to tell more and more of the story of this world of Gilead and this regime that treats women as property. What's that process of continuing that story?
Well, I think the process is very much the process you said, which is sticking with Margaret Atwood and sticking with her story. As long as you're extending out from what is a really well thought through, strong foundation of a world, it makes it a lot easier. And luckily, very fortunately, Margaret's been around for the whole process, and we've been able to talk about just extensions of the things that she mentioned in the book, extensions of that world. So I think we're very much still making The Handmaid's Tale and making Margaret Atwood's book into a television show. We've just been able to kind of dig around in some edges you don't get time to in a novel.
How much communication do you get with Margaret? I mean, is she pretty vocal if she doesn't like something, or has she been thumbs up the whole way through?
Well, she's certainly vocal about positive and negative things. I've been very lucky. I mean, I know, the bulk of people who adapt a book don't have any contact with the author, and if they do, it's sometimes negative. But oftentimes, when you're adapting what was a classic, the author is long gone, so you don't have anybody to talk to at all. So, in terms of me just having a resource of someone to talk to, her available time is never enough for me. I would just, as she's busier than you and I put together. So I think that I love her to be involved, and we do talk, as often as we can. And I think that we try to kind of talk about the season all the way through the season, as we're making it, as we're writing it, as we're talking about it. So it isn't one big conversation. But I think, Margaret is in all ways, a producer on the project. She acts as a producer. She gets the material that a producer does. She chimes in as a producer. So anyway, it's we're very lucky to have Margaret, and very lucky that Margaret is an expert at having her work adapted. I'm adapting The Handmaid's Tale. The Handmaid's Tale's already been an opera, a play, a movie. So in some ways, I'm way behind her. She's so much more facile in saying this works, this doesn't work. She's seen it a bunch of times. So I think that in that way, it's a unique situation. You have someone who is such just a famous writer, such an influential writer, such someone who's really wrote a classic and is still around writing things. And they also are very comfortable with it being adapted by another person. So that combination, which is, all decisions Margaret made, and I'm very grateful that she kind of embraced both the process of kind of continuing to let me, bother her with questions that she never had to think about. Also with the idea of always having someone she can come to and say, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. But in terms of when people don't like things, it's almost always things you kind of haven't figured out a way to make work either. It's not like, you and I read a script and you love something and I hate it. It's much more like we both see the same thing and we're trying to work through it together.
One of the things I find so fascinating about this series is that how much you can hate a character in one moment and then all of a sudden feel bad for them in the next, particularly someone like Serena, even Aunt Lydia. Sometimes you're like, does she need a hug? So I'm just curious about, how are you able to sort of round these characters out who do such awful things, but the viewer still has some sort of empathy for them?
Well, I think it's, first of all, it's just point of view, looking at their point of view and making sure that they're not bad people in their own minds. And so how are they justifying it? And don't make it kind of, to them, it doesn't feel like justifying. To them, it feels like the actual reason. So I think a lot of it is both having a sense of characters that were created in a novel, so you get a little bit more into their head, and also just our actors, Yvonne Strahovski, Joseph Fiennes, play people who do reprehensible things. And certainly both of those actors kind of despise their characters' actions. So but I think that because you have those characters those actors who are able to find not only the lie that the person is telling themselves to justify it, but to forget that it's a lie, to find a way to make it true to them. That is really, so it's so much more them than me. It's so much more, we dig around, but they are the people who deliver a full performance. And it's funny that you say, oh, there's these characters you hate who do such terrible things, but you feel sympathy for them. They don't, our main character tore a man to pieces at the end of both the end of the season and the end of the pilot, if you remember.
Yeah.
And no one thinks of her as someone terrible who you feel empathy for. I mean, she does terrible things as well. I mean, it's just that I think it's all about how you couch it in that weird moral universe of Gilead.
And as you're moving the series along, I mean, is it draining to go home and think, how can I make these people's lives miserable? I mean, it's and I don't really mean that as a joke. I mean, it has to be sort of sucking the energy out of you to some degree of how do you keep creating these terrible things?
Well, it is draining, and it's more draining during these times when you feel like stuff you're writing is then reflected 6 months later in the real world, which is a terrible feeling because you're trying to come up with, as you said, the worst things you can imagine. And then when someone says, ha ha ha, it happened, you're like, no, that's not funny. I was really trying to come up with something terrible. I think a lot of it, the way that you deal with it is by the incredible good grace and professionalism of our cast and crew and staff, writing staff, that it isn't about, it's about entertainment, and it's about telling a good story, and it's about telling these character stories, and the things that happen to them that knock them down, we're thinking about how do they endure those, not how do we inflict those. So it's much more for us a story about endurance and heroics, and basically I always put myself in the position of June as what would I do, and June is so tough and so inspiring and so strong and also so committed to the people she loves in her life that I think that's the inspiring part. So I always look at that rather than, it's kind of like the whatever the hardship is, you just look at it as a lens to focus the kind of heroics of the character.
And what is that partnership with Elisabeth Moss like? I mean, what a powerhouse actress, obviously. And can you talk about just collaborating with her, and not just because she's a star, but she's also a co-producer and she's directing a lot of episodes now. So what's that partnership like?
I am extraordinarily lucky to be partnered with Lizzie, and we didn't know each other coming into this project, except I knew her career, and she had not directed when she came into this project, and I don't think she had been a producer yet. She's a producer in every respect, not just in name only. She is an executive producer on the show, and she's worked her way up over the seasons. But it is she is at she's as remarkable kind of as a talent as you would imagine, as thoughtful and generous, and the way she is, you get that performance by being someone who everybody can work with and be their best, and that's what she does. Just creates a very calm environment that translates to how she produces, how she's remarkably funny and not disappears into her characters and has a terrible mouth and all these kinds of things. So she's a wonderful colleague. She's worked in television for a very long time and worked on many long-standing series. So she really knows how to be a colleague on a TV show. But creatively, she's invested trust in me and had kind of opened herself up as an artist to me in ways that I cannot, appreciate enough. And it's been lovely to see her both want to direct. And when she came to me and said, I'm really interested in directing, I was like, well, I've been waiting since day 2, but it's nice of you to come. Because she waits till she's ready and she moves into it. But it's hard for me to say. Over the last year and a half, during COVID especially, we've worked together so closely that I adore her as a friend and a colleague more than I can express to you. I mean, just respect her more. And the whole cast has been such professionals. But but Lizzie, I mean, our working relationship and our creative relationship couldn't be any closer. And I just feel incredibly lucky. You don't get that very often. And to get it with someone who also, I can write the stuff that's the hardest for me to write and she can still do it. That's fun, because then I'm like, ooh, what if I write this? And so that part is really fun. Is she also, in addition to just being a spectacular, brilliant person and a good egg, is also just a great actress. So you can really play with that too. And she loves doing it, and I love pushing her. So,
Well, Bruce, it's a partnership we're grateful for, and congratulations on all the accolades that The Handmaid's Tale has received and continues to receive. Good luck with the PGA Awards nomination coming up, and thank you for sitting down and speaking with us about The Handmaid's Tale.
thank you very much for having me. It was my pleasure.